All right, everybody, welcome back to the Autumn Transport Podcast. My name is Brenton. The guest that I have with us today is the Autumn Safety Director, owner, and founder of Senty Transportation Services. We have Chris Senty.
Thanks for having me, Brenton. It's great to say. I think this is my third one.
Yeah, we always bring in this time of the year because we got something kind of big coming up. The CVSA International Roadcheck is coming up in May. The dates on that are May 14th through May 16th, so that's happening next week. So we got to get you in here and get all the information we can from you on what they're going to be checking for that road check. Make sure that our Autumn drivers and any other drivers that are out there listening to this podcast are ready to go.
Yeah, and it's earlier this year. It's usually in June, so it's kind of taken drivers by surprise this year.
Well, buckle up, everybody, and get ready because we know that the DOT is going to be out on the roads. Last year during the International Road Check, or what's also called the DOT Blitz, there was nearly 60,000 inspections. So they're going to be out in force.
Yeah. That when you look at that, and if they do a level one, that's about a half hour to 45 minutes. So when you think of the time spent inspecting these vehicles.
Yeah, they spend a lot of time doing that. I saw on the DOT website that last year, 81% of the commercial motor vehicles and 94.5% of commercial motor vehicle drivers that went through the inspections, they didn't have any out-of-service violations, and they continued on route safely to finish their runs, which is good. I know here at Autumn, we had a few guys get checked, and everything went well there. So just want to make sure that we're ready to go again this year.
Yeah, we were perfectly clean last year, so knock on wood here that we're going to do the same this year.
That's right. Way to go, Autumn drivers. But the not so good news was that as part of those 60,000 inspections, it did result in about 120,000 different violations. So while 80% were good, there was still almost 120,000 violations, which is kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah. Yeah, you're looking at the number. That's at least 2 to 3 violations per truck as they're going through. And what they're dealing with this year with brakes is one of the top 3 violations when they're doing these roadside inspections.
So just because guys weren't getting put out of service doesn't mean they weren't still receiving violations for one thing or another.
Correct. Yeah, in CSA, I think they're looking at redoing it, and they said currently there's over 900 different violations that a driver can incur overall. 900? 900. And if they go through with the proposed changes, that would be knocked down to, I think it was around 170 some violations.
I did not know that. That's a lot of stuff that our drivers are having to pay attention to.
Yeah. When they're doing these pre-trip inspections, they have a lot to pay attention to because one issue could lead to multiple violations.
Yeah, so really good reminder that it's not enough to just walk around your truck real fast and check a couple boxes and move on. If you do that too many times, it's going to catch up with you.
Correct. Yeah, the kick the tires and light the fires doesn't necessarily work anymore.
That's right. Well, the top 3 violations last year during the Blitz were brakes, lights, cargo securement, and the top 3 violations for the drivers had to do with what we probably all guess: your hours of service, your logs, and then actually different driver's license issues.
Yep, driver qualification, whether they didn't have the proper class of license for the vehicle they were driving, if they didn't have a current medical card, or any their license wasn't renewed or their health card wasn't renewed. Some of the more common ones. And this year, also the second part of this year's road check will be dealing with the drivers also with the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse.
Yeah, we'll jump into that in just a second here. Speaking of license, is probably something that gets overlooked a bit. Guys think I'll just take care of that when I get home, or they kind of know that it's upcoming and maybe forget the date. I mean, when I changed my driver's license, I had moved. And I don't think I changed the address on my license after moving for 7 months. Just never thought about it. or it expired when I turned 24 or 25, whenever that expires, and just never thought to even check that. So I know we have some checks and balances. We have our safety team with you and Char and Jennifer and the dispatchers who work with the drivers to remind them that that's coming up. But as you're thinking about the Blitz and you're thinking about your truck and all the other things those 900 things that you might get dinged on, make sure you pull the driver's license out and just check your med card, make sure everything's all up to date. That's kind of an easy one.
Yeah, it takes you 1 minute, pull it out, read, hey, am I within the date? And especially if you're going to renew it, make sure you have the proper documentations that you need to renew your license. Because if you do wait till the last minute and you're missing a birth certificate or something that you need, you're not going to be driving until you get that information.
Yeah, so the DOT might not put you out of service, but you might put yourself out of service by not having those documents. And you don't get CSA points, but you also don't get a paycheck for that time you're not working.
Correct.
So make sure you're keeping an eye on that. Just as an overview here, like we said, the DOT Blitz that's coming up, it's a 72-hour event. It's the International Roadcheck. So this is happening in the United States and Canada and Mexico. They'll be checking pretty much everything with trucks and drivers. So looking at ELD compliance, tire treads, brakes, exhaust, suspension system, lights. They go through the whole standard level 1 inspection and go through all of those different parts. But there's a couple different things this year that are focuses. So Chris, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what's the focus of this road check going to be?
So the primary 2 focus areas are going to be tractor protection systems and anti-bleed back systems, which deals with the valving in the brakes, and then also controlled substance and drug and alcohol clearinghouse. So with the tractor protection system, when a driver does a brake bleed down test, that's basically what they're going to be going through on the roadside. So to test the tractor protection valve, you will release, you'll turn the vehicle off with it at its correct pressure above 90 psi, and then turn it back on. Make sure that you have chocks on the wheels. Get out, take off your red air hose, face it down, and then get in and push in the yellow knob or the trailer knob, and air should come rushing out. And at a certain psi between 60 and 80, that light should come on and that knob should pop out. And what that does is allows the tractor to still function with air, because if the tractor brakes lock up, you're at its mercy to wherever it's going to go. So that's allowing you to be able to function with the tractor and try to get it to side of the road or somewhere out of danger.
So you're talking about, I've seen the things about online, in Facebook, the pictures that say like, my truck comes with a ketchup and mustard dispenser.
Yep.
And I remember as a kid sitting in the truck looking at my dad's dash and kind of wondering what those 2 knobs were, wanting to pull them out and push them in. So you mentioned this is the yellow, the trailer one.
Correct. And if your dad probably had one, which I know your dad probably had one with a blue knob too, because back in the day it had that additional one. But correct. Sorry, actually I misquoted the color. The red is the trailer. The yellow is the tractor. So I want to make sure I get that correct. So yeah, you're going to go with the ketchup, not the mustard.
Okay.
And make sure that your low air warning light's coming on at that 60 to 80 psi. And then when you're doing the bleed down test, the knob should pop out between 20 and 40 psi when you're doing the bleed down test also. With the tractor protection, they're looking for a mass air loss. And that's where it'll be popping out at a different pressure. And then if they're doing the brake bleed down, that's the simple as making sure that the truck is at proper air, shut the truck off, make sure your wheels are chalked, turn the key back on, and then you're going to release both the truck and trailer brakes, let it sit for 1 minute, and measure your air loss. Should not be more than 5 psi. And then
they're measuring that on the dash,
Correct.
On the gauge.
On the gauge, the officer will tell you, okay, start, and then he'll tell you to stop, and then he'll say, how much did you lose? And then you're going to make a brake application and hold that for another minute. And then they'll ask the same thing again. Okay, how much did you lose? For a single vehicle, you can't lose more than 3 psi, and for a combination vehicle, no more than 4 psi during that time. And then you're going to continue to pump the brake until you get down to where the knobs will pop out, and that should be between the 20 and 40 psi.
And what's the popping out?
The pop out is that protection. Once it's there, it's going to engage the brakes. So if you're going to be down that low, that the tractor one should pop out, or the trailer should pop out first, allowing you to get the tractor off somewhere safely. Once you start noticing, that's why you get that low air warning, is so that you can get the vehicle off the road safely. And hopefully by the time you get it off somewhere safely, then it'll pop and you'll be in a safe area.
What would be some of the things that would lead to losing air? So they're doing these things on the check to intentionally lose air, right?
Correct.
What would be things that would lead to you losing air just while you were driving or while you were sitting, non-intentional ways?
Air hoses coming apart. If you have a glad hand that comes off, you could be making a turn if they're not secured properly if it comes off. Just old air hoses, if they're plastic and they've been bent, if they've been kinked, they get weak spots. If they're rubber and they wear through, you'll just have a hole that'll develop and start leaking air. If you hit road debris, something could come up and knock a brake chamber off or an air hose. There's different scenarios that you can lead to your parts. Compressors have been known to, I call it flip a lid, but they'll compressors, if a compressor comes apart, that can lead to an air loss also.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen trucks where you look at the hoses coming off the tractor and they're like wrapped all in duct tape. And I'm guessing maybe they thought that was the simple solution to plug an air hole.
Yep. So as a safety person, not only when I'm doing OSHA inspections, but when I'm inspecting drivers' trucks, I tell them, if you don't want me to find a violation immediately, don't wrap it in tape. Because the first thing I do is unwrap it.
Yeah.
And that's what roadside's going to do is, okay, well, you put tape on this, what are you hiding?
Right.
And that's what I assume too. And under 95, 98% of it, I find a violation. The other few percent is a guy who's like, well, I don't have zip ties, so every few feet I just put some electrical tape to hold the hoses together. Okay, I get it, but don't use tape because you got people like me that can come and unwrap it and go, what are you hiding?
Yeah, they always said that don't get a red car when you're young because for some reason the police think the red cars are going faster and you're more likely to get pulled over.
Yep.
So don't put the silver duct tape on your truck, or that's just an invitation to get something looked at.
And just like the DOT says too, if you're driving with your four-ways on, that's just a flash to say, come and get me, come and get me. Because unless you're a hazard on the side of the road, if you're driving slow on the side of the road, that's when your hazard is meant. If you're in a lane of traffic and you're driving with your hazards on, you're doing something you're not supposed to, and they're going to come over and check it out.
Sure.
So yeah, don't tape anything. Don't make it look so obvious that they go, oh, okay.
Air hoses that are leaking, stuff like that, that's something that drivers should be catching during their pre and post trips to checking those hoses, making sure they're not being worn, things like that. You mentioned the glad hand seal. We did a little training today. You had a great training with our dispatch staff and the folks in the office here teaching us about a brake chamber and things to look for and possible violations regarding slack adjusters and things like that. And you mentioned the glad hand seals. They're like, you said they're the cheapest thing on a truck to repair.
Correct. At our local area here, if you go over to the Peterbilt dealership, they're 48 cents a piece. I don't know of anything else cheaper on the truck than a glad hand seal.
Now you can't even get a pop in your truck for less than that.
Yeah. And yet it's one of the most common roadside violations for air leak between tractor and trailer connection. So at those glad hands, what I appreciate what the FMCSA put out is they're using all of their senses during this inspection. Because air leaks, you normally think of, I'm going to listen for it.
Right.
Well, as they're saying here, they're going to be feeling for them also. So they're going to be using their hands, putting them over those tractor and trailer connections to see if they can feel any air coming out of there. So it just goes to show, again, you need to be using all of your senses when you're doing a pre or post-trip test. But visually checking the hoses, the slack adjusters, the brake chambers, and then listening for any of those air leaks. And with your glide hands, feeling now for them. Just put your hand over there. Do you feel any air escape?
So I sit in the office and tell trucks where to go. I'm the first to say I'm not a genius when it comes to how they actually work. Are you saying with the truck and the trailer connected and the truck running, you just put your hand by that glad hand seal and you could feel air?
So with that, there's two different ones. One you're not going to check yourself, but just have the tractor brakes applied and release the trailer brakes, which would be that red knob.
Okay.
And then you can get out and then put your hand around it. You can listen to see if you hear anything. The blue airline is for your service brake, so that doesn't get energized until you push on the brake pedal.
Okay.
So if you have someone with you, you can say, hey, either hold my pedal down or I'll hold the pedal and you check for the air leak at that connection.
On the blue one.
Yep. And if you don't have anyone around you, keeping a bottle of soapy water, just spray it down. And if you get out and there's bubbles around it after you're applying, then you know for sure you got a leak.
Oh, that's a great tip. Yeah. And you also gave a tip on the glad hand seals that they get dry up, they crack, they break. But one of the things that you can do is to keep them lubricated with some Vaseline.
Correct. Any type of clean petroleum product, don't use used fifth wheel grease because that has sand and other chemicals in it that you're not going to want on that glad hand seal. So use just something that's clean and petroleum based because it keeps that rubber soft and pliable. Whereas if it gets that old and brittle when you go to hook up to the trailer and you turn that glad hand, it's much harder to do, but then two, you risk tearing it and then developing a leak.
Right. So does that kind of cover, do you think, the tractor protection and anti-bleed back systems?
Yep. The bleed back one, you'll notice when you go to take your glad hands off and you have both knobs pulled out, if air comes rushing out, then that's the easiest one to check. If air comes rushing out, you know that your bleed back valve is bad.
So what do they need to do if our drivers notice they have a problem? Replacing the glad hand seal is easy, but if they're having problems with that PSI, if it's not within the range that it's supposed to be at, we're going to try to get this posted this week so guys have some time to get some stuff fixed. What do? How do they identify other issues that might be happening?
That's where a shop visit's usually going to be in line unless you're mechanically inclined. You're going to be checking the knobs are a valve assembly themselves. When you take the dash apart, the knobs have all the hoses connected in the back, and that's a whole assembly itself. So if you're comfortable enough and they're either not popping out or you have air leaks in there, you can just pull that whole assembly out and put a new assembly in. Again, if you're mechanically inclined, it's not like just pulling out something real easy and plugging it back in. You have to take the dash apart to do it. Or airlines, if you feel comfortable replacing an airline, that's easy enough these days. If you're going to splice an airline due to damage on a hose, make sure you do it legally. Like you said, no duct tape, no electrical tape, no hose clamps, things like that. They make kits that are legal splice kits, and make sure you're using one of those.
Okay.
Otherwise, get with a shop and have a qualified technician inspect it and let you know what the problems are.
You mentioned in our training that the ketchup and mustard dispensers there in the truck, that they can actually go bad.
Correct.
And that if they're working correctly, you'll get a nice pop sound. And if they're not, it's just kind of
it just kind of goes. Huh.
Poof. It makes me think of like just a little soft fart noise. Just,
yeah.
Poof.
Exactly.
But they should be popping.
Yes.
When they release.
You should know a definite, yep, it just popped. Look down at your gauge and see what the PSI is. If you have no idea when it popped and you actually have to reach up and grab to see if it engaged or not, that's a problem.
And that's signifying a problem with the actual knob and system there itself, not something back probably in the rest of the trailer.
Correct. It's going to be in that valve body itself.
that they just go bad over time. The amount of times you push them in and pull them out, or they pop themselves out, like anything else, wear and tear, that could just go bad.
Correct. And where the hose is connected, and that, you're going to develop leaks with there over time, especially. Our roads are so nice and smooth.
Oh, yeah.
You
Nice
don't
and
have to
smooth.
worry about any of that. But, they're going to vibrate loose. You're going to develop air leaks in it over time. And the springs just become worn because we do use them so much every day.
Well, before we move on then, Chris, what would you say, what's your number one tip for drivers to be looking at and thinking about as it regards to the tractor protection anti-bleed back system?
To do a tractor protection valve literally takes 2 minutes with setting the brakes, getting out and unhooking the hose, pushing in the knob, let it pop, rebuild air. And to do a brake bleed down test is between 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how familiar you are with it, how long it takes to build up air. That is time that is so well spent and can be done so quickly before the Blitz to make sure that everything's functioning so you have time to get it corrected before they correct it for you.
But Chris, I got to get my load delivered. I got to get my day started. I got to keep moving. I just want to take a chance.
The time that you're going to spend out of service during this time and the amount of frustration you're going to cause your dispatcher, because your dispatcher, especially if you're at Autumn, tells you to make sure you get it done beforehand. That's one thing that we excel at here, is making sure that we are getting things fixed before the problem occurs on roadside. And no matter what you think you're saving in time, I'll guarantee you're not, because once you hit that out of service point, if you're a small company, your CSA scores jump very quick if you only have a few trucks and you're put out of service once. Larger companies can take a few of those hits, but between insurance, customers, that time you think you're saving, you're not. Just take that time and get it done.
And will the bleed back system, if that fails, that's an out of service?
If any of these fail, you're for sure to violation. It's an officer's discretion as to whether it's an out of service. There is out of service criteria, but on a tractor protection, if it's not popping, the vehicle's going to be put out of service. And if any part of the brake system is malfunctioning, it's generally looking at an out of service. And you can find out of service criteria at CVSA's website. They have, if you want a current years, you have to pay for it, but there's previous years out of service criteria out there that you can refer to.
I saw that there's actually like a CVSA out of service criteria app that you can subscribe to, I guess, and then you just have it right there on your phone what all those criteria are.
Correct. And I think I paid $49 for it, and it's probably one of the better apps I have for doing my business.
Interesting. So maybe you guys want to check that out. Last thing I guess I would say about that also is this is something that's going to be checked at any sort of a roadside inspection.
Correct.
Not just during the Blitz.
Correct.
So it's not good enough to say, well, I think I'll just take May 14th through 16th off to try to avoid this. This is something that we should be checking all the time, like you said this morning or this afternoon in our meeting. At least once a month or once a week, drivers, let me correct that, at least once per week, drivers should be doing the anti-bleed check just to make sure that that's all going, because this is a violation at any time, not just during the Blitz.
Correct. And as far as our Autumn drivers, you don't want to come to the terminal and have me inspect your truck and none of these items pass. So
yeah, I can say I've seen Chris outside with gloves on his hands and up and down in cabs doing these sorts of checks to make sure that we are safe out there on the road, and teaching and training guys who may not know how to do it or how important it is. It's never a gotcha. It's always a teaching and training, which is what we really appreciate about you, Chris. That's kind of the, maybe you could say, less exciting part of the Blitz. The more exciting part of the Blitz is what they're going to be checking on with drivers. So you have the equipment side, and then you have the driver's side. And this year, that side of things is controlled substance and alcohol possession.
Yep.
So talk about that, Chris. What are they going to be looking for?
So when you get there, the first thing they're going to be looking for is at the driver. Does the driver show any signs of impairment? Slurred speech, balance, things like that. Are you showing any obvious signs of impairment? If that looks good, then they're moving on to the vehicle, including the trailer. So if they search any part of the vehicle
to see if the vehicle has any substance abuse problems.
Yeah, you see over by the air intake a little white stripe around it. No, they're checking for any controlled substance, whether it be alcohol or drugs or any type of paraphernalia on the commercial motor vehicle. Because some drivers are like, well, I'll just put it in the trailer and I'll tell them it's part of my load. That doesn't work. The only time alcohol is allowed anywhere on a commercial motor vehicle is if it is a manifested part of the load. So if you think, oh, I'm just going to stop at the liquor store, I'll grab a 6-pack, I'll put it in my trailer, so when I get to the truck stop for my 34 or when I get home, I'm good. That's not the case. Anywhere on a commercial motor vehicle, alcohol is not allowed.
Yeah, I used to love when I would go to Canada. It's pretty accessible now, but going to Canada, coming back with some Molson Canadian or some Labatt's beer, and having it in the trunk of the car, because you couldn't get it where I was at, so you wanted to bring it back with you. Can't do that in your truck.
No,
not at all.
Not at all. If you want alcohol, call it an Uber. Alcohol's not allowed in the vehicle. And the officers or some of the inspectors are even taking up things like NyQuil, because that's 10% alcohol.
Oh, wow.
So they're going just beyond looking for, a beer or a bottle of whiskey or something. They're looking for anything that has alcohol in it that could impair a driver's ability to drive safely. Yeah. So it's not only just straight up alcohol. You have to look to see what other things contain also.
Well, one of those things that's kind of becoming more and more prevalent is marijuana. And the products that go with marijuana, THC and other things like that. You have the edibles, the gummies, all of that stuff. And like where we live here in Minnesota, that's legal. Other states, it's not. Now, what happens if a driver, he's got a load to drop off in Minnesota and he wants to bring some gummies back for his wife, for him and his wife? Can he have those in the truck?
Unfortunately, no. And that's a common misconception, especially with so many states legalizing marijuana, that drivers say, well, my state made it legal, so I can do this. Unfortunately, federal trumps state, no matter what in this case. So in a commercial motor vehicle, that would be considered a violation of the controlled substances regulations. The example I gave in our meeting was flying from Colorado to Minnesota. Both states are legal for marijuana, but you still can't do that because the airport is considered a federal location. So even though you're going from state to state where it's legal, federal still doesn't allow it.
I think that is even true in passenger cars driving from state to state.
Correct. If you get into a state that does not have it as a recreational, then you can be stated. Excuse me. You can be cited in that state also.
Yeah, I'm not a user of those products, but I was on a hunting trip in Colorado, and some of the people I was with talked about picking up some things in Colorado to bring back home to Minnesota. This was before Minnesota had legalized things. And there's a whole deal about certain cities there in Nebraska where the troopers were just waiting for people coming from Colorado, pulling them over and busting them for that stuff because it wasn't even legal. It isn't, I don't think, legal even to transport from state to state.
No, depending on what the state's regulations are. And I think I heard about that too. I think they were looking for the Cheetos in the window. They're just sitting there eating Cheetos on the back.
I was going to ask you for the controlled substance. It's a good idea for the drivers to get their Cheeto bags off the dash.
Yep. Yeah. And the other part of that is what's called the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. It's been out for more than 4 years now, but there's carriers out there that still are not aware of it, and drivers that are not aware of it because maybe they've worked for the same company for more than 4 years. And if you refuse a test or test positive, your name's going to be entered into that Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse.
Okay.
So let's say I'm at carrier A and I fail a drug test. Used to be before 2000, I could go to apply at another carrier and not tell them about carrier A where I failed the drug test, and then I'd get a driving job with them. Well, that's what the clearinghouse, one of the major things that it meant to stop was drivers being able to get rehired by another carrier after failure or refusal of a test. So when you get pulled over, after they look at you and determine if there's any impairment, after they inspect the vehicle, then they're going to run you through the drug and alcohol clearinghouse. And if you come through that as prohibited, then you're out of service at that point. And that's one of those where it's the driver out of service, not the vehicle. So you're not leaving the scale unless it's by Uber or taxi or something else, somebody coming to get you. Somebody else can come and take the truck away, but you're not leaving the scale.
So we've always been able, or for quite a long time, you've been able to see someone's driving record, see if they had tickets, if they had accidents, what their CSA points were. But this clearinghouse now is another level of that shows you if they've had a violation for drug and alcohol, or if they've refused the test.
Correct.
It's just another layer of protection for companies that are looking to hire drivers to find out what type of a driver I'm really hiring.
Correct. Yeah, because a carrier is relying on the driver to be truthful when they apply, stating here's all the carriers I've worked at, because you're required to do job verifications for the last 3 years. And if they fail to put those carriers down, a carrier prior to 2000 had no idea or no way to verify that, they're able to drive. Now, if they're following the regulation and running that pre-employment query and it comes back as prohibited, now that carrier is protected because they say, sorry, we can't hire you until you follow a certain process. And if a driver gets a positive, it's not the end of their career. They can go through what's called the Substance Abuse Professional Program, do a return to duty test, complete the follow-up testing, and then once they're done with all of that, I don't want to say it's like nothing happened, but you're free to, you don't have to do anything else in addition to what you just went through.
Does your name come off the clearinghouse, or does it stay on there with like an asterisk?
It can stay in there up to 5 years, depending on how much follow-up testing that the SAP recommends. Because the minimum is 6 random tests within the first 12 months. And SAP, depending on the level of addiction or how big the problem is, they can say we're going to do random testing up to 5 years. And then once the driver completes that, the carrier goes in and says, we've completed the follow-up testing. And then at that point, it closes that case. So then carrier C, when they went to apply them, it would say no open violations. It would show a closed one. Gotcha. So then that means they've done it and they don't have to do anything further.
Well, Chris, a question I have for you here is the Blitz is going on May 14th through the 16th. Say I'm a guy who I've been home until the 13th, and I'm actually planning to come out of the house. I got my first load to pick up Tuesday morning, the 14th, but Monday night was my birthday, and so we all went out and we had burritos and tequila and margaritas. Should I be taking more time off? What alcohol can be in my system, if any, when I start driving again?
So when you get behind the wheel, the amount that is allowed in your system is 0. Any concentration at all will put you out of service for 24 hours. Anything 0.02 and above is now a DOT issue. At 0.04 and above, that's considered driving while intoxicated in a commercial motor vehicle. And a common misconception is commercial drivers say, well, that goes to my personal vehicle too. It does not. In your personal vehicle, depending on your state, is still 0.08. But if you're going to be getting in that truck, you can't have any alcoholic beverages prior to within 4 hours of coming on duty. So think about how much you drank the night before. You may not be ready to drive the next morning because the body only processes alcohol at a certain amount per hour. So if you only had a couple, you might be okay. But every body processes it a little different, as we found out when we did our reasonable suspicion training.
Yeah. Here's another scenario. I'm one of those drivers that likes to drive at night. So I drive most of the night, and I'm shutting it down at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. go off duty. I'm hungry. So I'm going to go have a beer and a burger. And then I'm going to hit the bed. Then I'm going to take off driving again at, midnight when my clock resets. Couldn't that beer and that burger that I had for dinner there before I went to bed, that impact me the next day?
It could impact you while you're still off. If you're seen consuming alcoholic beverages and getting into a commercial motor vehicle, if somebody turns you in and you have the keys in and the truck's running, that could be an issue for you. Depending on the size of the beer, if it was a 12 ounce, you might be okay in your 10-hour break, but you had the big, like
it was a 2-for-1.
Yeah, or you had the big 40 ounce. You probably won't be ready at the end of your 10-hour break. So everyone is very different, but yeah, if you're gonna have one when you stop, I'd probably keep it at one and make sure it's not a 40 ounce or something that's very hard alcohol.
So if I'm in Houston, it's hot in the evening, I need some few cold beers to cool off, refresh myself. I walk back over to my truck, but it's hot, so I got to run the truck. I got to have that air running. I could get a knock on the door, and I could get put out of service or worse.
Buyer beware. There's many states that you can get a operating or a driving under the influence by having the keys in the ignition. So it's buyer beware that if you're in that truck and you have alcohol in your system, where's the keys and what are you doing? If you're only on a 10-hour break and you tell the officer that and you tell them, well, I just had a beer an hour ago and you're 7 hours into your break, you're going to have an issue. So buyer beware, because each state has a little bit different regulations as to what they would consider for operating or driving under the influence.
Well, what's your one piece of advice here then for this section, controlled substance and alcohol possession? What would you say? How do you beat the Blitz in this section?
Play it straight. Be aware of what you're consuming, when you're consuming it, how much you're consuming, and then consider when you'll be driving next. And if you're a company, make sure you've got the proper policies in place to make sure that drivers understand what's allowed and what's not at your company.
Yeah, we always want to encourage drivers to be smart, to be safe, and to make good choices. But for no other reason, just go 3 days sober. Don't give them any reason to look at you, smell anything on you, or even think that that's an issue for you.
Correct. Yeah, it might sound a little hard to go 3 days, but everyone can do it.
Everybody can do it. That's definitely right. Well, Chris, thanks for taking some time to go through this road check with us here. Any closing thoughts?
No, just do your pre-trip, your post-trip, take the time. It's 3 days, but if you go in prepared, those 3 days will go by quick. So take it easy, and if you have questions, email in, call. Happy to work with any of our drivers that have questions on this.
I know the people in life typically, regarding the Blitz, a lot of drivers will get worked up about it. I've heard guys don't want to work during the Blitz. There are more inspections going on. Guys are worried that little things will be found, big things will be found. But it's really true in life that if you're doing things right, you have nothing to worry about.
Correct.
It's the people who are trying to cut corners, people who are intentionally ignoring things, that are the ones that have to worry about getting in trouble. But if you're doing things right, like Chris said, you're doing your pre-trips, you're doing your post-trips, you care about your job, you care about your company, you care about your equipment, you're going to be just fine. There's nothing for you to worry about in this Blitz.
You've got that right. And if you want to look at it a certain way, so at Autumn, we give incentives for clean inspections. As a lot of companies do, you can just look at it, hey, I want to get inspected because then I get my clean inspection, then I get my beer money. So after my 3 days sober for the inspection, I go buy a case of beer.
There you go. And it's a good chance to maybe get one of those clean inspection stickers that will help you out maybe down the road at further inspections.
Yep, we call those the get out of jail free card.
So invest in your future. Don't hide from it.
Exactly.
Well, Well, thanks everybody for listening today. I hope you learned a little something about the Blitz, and I hope that it goes great for everybody and that nobody has any violations or any issues. Make sure to check out the Autumn Transport podcast for further education from Chris Senty and Senty Transportation Services. You can find him online and a lot of social media places, as well as finding Autumn. We're on all the channels, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Autumn Transport, and we'll link Chris's information in our show notes. Thanks everybody, and drive safe.